Welcome to the Elliott Heim Network. I'm your host, Trinaya Battle. First, I would like to start off by saying Happy Teacher Appreciation Day. The Washington Teachers Union has launched a major initiative called Learning Doesn't Stop, Lessons on TV. Let's check out our first lesson from Jared Catapano from Lafayette Elementary. And our second lesson will be by Rachel Thomas from Bunker Hill Elementary. Let's see what we can learn today.
Good morning, everybody. This is Mr. Catapano again from Lafayette Elementary School, and today we're going to talk about multiplying mixed numbers by whole numbers using an area model. So let's take a look. Here we go. Again, you should be familiar with utilizing the area model when we've done whole number multiplication in the past, whether that's in 4th or 5th grade. But today I'm going to give you another way to utilize the area model to solve these problems. So let's take a look. The first thing I want to talk about is rules about multiplication, right? We know that multiplication can be thought of as repeated addition of the same value. So for example, we know that 3 times 3 is the same as 3 plus 3 plus 3, right? We know that times means groups of, so 3 times 3 means 3 groups of 3. We know that we can reverse the order of these factors and the product stays the same. So if I had a problem like 2 times 4, right, the product would be the same even if I changed those factors around. 4 times 2. Okay. We know that we can break the numbers apart to make multiplying easier. So if I'm struggling with 4 times 2, I can break down 4 into 2 times 2 times 2, and I can just count up by 2's. Right? And we know that the multiplication problem can be shown as a rectangle utilizing an area model. Okay. We're going to think about these rules of multiplication as we multiply mixed numbers and wonder, is the same true for multiplication of fractions? We know all of these statements are true about multiplication, but is it true about multiplication of fractions? So let's think about that as we do these problems. Can we see it as repeated addition? Does times mean groups of? If we reverse the order of the factors, do we get the same product? Can we break them down to make it easier? And is multiplication of mixed numbers or fractions able to be shown in a rectangular area model? So let's take a look. Let's also review how to find the area of a rectangle, right? We know that an area of a rectangle has 2 measurements, the width and the length, right? We know this is a 2-dimensional shape, unlike last week where we were looking at 3-dimensional shapes. We know that the area is going to be just the length times the width, right? And our area is going to be in units squared, okay? So again, this is just review. Length by width gives us the area of a rectangle. So here's my area model that I'm going to show you today. We're going to be using this kind of model as we move forward. And what I'm going to explain to you is how we break down a problem like this. So the problem is 5 times 3.5. So what is our product here? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to break down my whole number value here. Okay, all of these are 1s. I know that all of these are whole numbers that I break apart here because I'm going to label them. This is 5 up top here. Right? We can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that is also on this side our width, right? It is 1, 2, and 3. So here are my whole number values here. 5 times 3. Okay? And so if we find the area of just the whole number section, I could count up all these 1s, right? Or I can do quick multiplication. What is 5 times 3, guys? Or 3 times 5? That's right, 3 times 5 or 5 times 3 is 15. So we know our whole number value. 5 times 3 is equivalent to 15. Okay, now we're going to take the other part of this problem, which is the half, okay? This is my half down here. Now you see I grayed out this area. Down here, I'm going to show you. All right, everybody see this grayed out area down here? I grayed this out because this is not our concern for this problem because we're just multiplying 5 times a half. This is our half that we're multiplying by. We need to figure out what our value is here in this section, okay? So in order to do that, we know that each one of these parts is a half. So this is a half here, this is another half here, another half here, here. Okay, so when we're multiplying 5 times a half, we could think about it like repeated addition. Think about that as one of our rules here, right? Multiplication is thought of as repeated addition of the same value, so that's true here. We could add a half plus a half plus a half plus a half plus a half, right? And we would get 1/2 plus a half is 1 whole. Here's another whole here, and a half here. So we have 1 whole, 2 wholes, and a half. Okay, so we know that 5 times a half is 2 and a half. Now we found our partial products here, but we want to find the area of the whole shape, right? We want to do the whole multiplication problem now. So we have to add up these two partial products together, and we have our half. 15 plus 2 is 17. So this is going to wind up being 17 and a half units squared. Remember, this is area, no longer volume, so it's square units here. Okay? So the question here now is, what is the math, right? What kind of math are we doing here? Well, what we're doing is we're utilizing the distributive property. Okay? So tiling a rectangle like we just did, using an area model to find the product of a whole number and a mixed number demonstrates the use of the distributive property. We also demonstrate the distributive property when using an array or an area model to multiply whole numbers, right? So here I broke it down for you. 5 times 3 and a half, get my pointer here, 5 times 3 and a half, okay, can be broken down into 5 times 3 plus 5 times a half, which is exactly what we did in the previous slide. 5 times 3 here, and 5 times a half. We see that? Cool. So we decomposed 3 and a half into 3 plus 1/2 in order to apply the distributive property. Here's the 3, here's the half. Okay? All right. So let's do this one here. Here we have my whole number value times my whole number value. 8 times 3. So there's my 8. There's my 3. Okay. And so what's my total area here of just the whole number value? 8 times 3. Or you can think about it as 3 times 8. 8 times 3 is 24. So now I need to do this fraction section down here. Right? This is my 3/4. So here I'm multiplying 8 times 3/4. Right here. Again, we don't need this grayed out area because we're not multiplying 8 times 4/4, just 8 times 3/4. So if we have 3/4 here and 3/4 here all the way down the line, what are we going to have? How many 8 times 3/4? Now, some of you may be saying, oh, I know. That's 24/4, right? Which you would be correct, right? Now, can we simplify this fraction? 24/4. How many fourths can I pull out of 24? Count my 4s, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. 6 wholes. We just need to add our partial products. 4 plus 6. 6 plus 4 is 10. With the 10, 20 plus 10 is 30. So we wind up with 30 units squared. All right? So let's do the math here. Right? 8 times 3 3/4. Again, we're utilizing the distributive property here. right? So what we're doing is we're making sure that we're multiplying 8 times both 3 and 3/4, right? So we can think of this section here as 3 plus 3/4. And then we're going to distribute it over to the 8, right? So we have 8 times 3 and 8 times 3/4. Okay, so we know 8 times 3 is, and that's right, 24. And 3/4 of 8, or 8 times 3/4, 8 times 3/4 is going to be, yep, 6. And that's going to give us our 30. So remember, we are utilizing the distributive property here to help us break down the math to find 30 units, square units. You can see that here, where we broke down 8 times 3 and 8 times 3/4. Okay? So as long as you are breaking down these parts using the distributive property, 8 times 3, 8 times 3/4, you will find your area and product. Again, we can use the area mile to find the answer or product to this multiplication problem. So I could do something as simple as, for this problem, 2 times 3 and 3/8. I could say, okay, here's my 3 wholes. I'm going to break that apart. Here are my 3/8. 3 and 3/8 right here. Okay. And I can multiply that by 2. So you see here, this is 2 by 3, which is this problem here. And then a 3/8 by 2, which is this problem here. So 3 times 2 is going to give us 6. And 3/8 times 2 will give us, good job, 6/8. So we just take those 2 partial products, we add them together, and what do we get? 6 and 6/8. Now 6/8 is okay, nothing wrong with that fraction, but could we simplify it? Could we make it, name it a different name other than 6/8? Could we call it fourths? How many fourths are there in 6/8? What would be my equivalent? 6 and... that's right, 3/4. So this would be 6 and 3/4 units squared. If you got 6/8, that's okay too. But just know that we can simplify it into 6 and 3/4. Thank you for joining me today in multiplying mixed numbers by whole numbers using an area model. If you want more information about this topic, you can go down to WTULocal6.net to find the materials for this lesson and so many others. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Thomas, a 4th and 5th grade ELA teacher at Bunker Hill. Welcome to another wonderful Wednesday. This week, we're going to do some social studies work and discussing the Great Depression. Today, we are in week 7, day 3 of the packet if you're following along in the learning plan. And as always, remember to stay home and stop the spread. Let's get started. If you're following along in the learning plan, great. If not, that's cool too. Get your notebook ready and have a pencil and a colored pencil available to help you circle vocabulary as we work. As we go through this study of the Great Depression, one will see a lot of similarities to our current day situation. We will be identifying how President Roosevelt took charge and made sure that America was revived and renewed. Our compelling question this week is, who should be blamed for the Great Depression? As you see from this image below, from February 1931, the National Archives and Records Administration, it shows a line of people lined up for food because they are unemployed. As a quick review, we're going to go over your previous supporting questions. So supporting question number 1, what caused the Great Depression? Supporting question number 2, how did the Great Depression affect the U.S. and what did the government try to do? And now we're going to continue with supporting question number 2 in this week's lesson.
To help us better understand and answer this question, we'll be looking at what standing President Roosevelt did to help end the Great Depression. We will be reading for task and materials. Read source E, Roosevelt's speech for a quote from President Franklin Roosevelt, and source F, the New Deal programs, which is a chart if you're following along in the learning plan. If not, the chart will be on the slideshow. The chart shows programs used by the government to help people during the Great Depression. Then we will answer 3 text-dependent questions. Again, if you're following in the learning plan, you can write your text-dependent questions in the space provided. If not, get a pencil and paper ready, and I will pose the questions, and you can take time to answer them. The text. Source background. In 1932, President Hoover lost his re-election to Franklin Roosevelt. President Roosevelt said the following quote during his first speech as president in 1933. Source E, Roosevelt's speech. This great nation will endure, survive, as it is endured, will revive, and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing that we have to fear is fear itself. More source background information. President Roosevelt enacted his New Deal programs and policies to help end the Great Depression. He reformed the role of government to help restore confidence in the American economy. The New Deal alone did not end the Great Depression. Mobilizing the country for World War II increased industrial production and job creation. The chart below does not include all of the programs that were established. But before we get into the chart, I want to discuss the 3 R's. The 3 R's help one understand the strategies of the New Deal program. First, we have relief. President Roosevelt strived to put money in the hands of Americans that were unemployed. This was so that they were able to purchase food and be able to provide shelter for themselves. Next, we have recovery. This was programs to put Americans back to work. This meant that artists and people in jobs that were no longer available were put back to work, creating a lot of the infrastructure of America, such as building schools, roadways, bridges, and such. Next, we have reform. There was a lot of legislative policy that was created to stabilize the American economy. A few of them still exist today, especially the Federal Depositories Insurance Company. This means that banks are backed by legislation to make sure that should the economy crash again, that unlike before during the Great Depression, when people lost all their money, that you would not lose your money in this current climate. Now that we've discussed the 3 R's, let's see what those new program deals were. Starting with the Homeowners Loan Act. This guaranteed home loans, enabling more people to buy homes during the Great Depression. Then there's the Civilian Conservation Corps, created jobs and cared for the natural environment. As mentioned before, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is still around today, insured bank deposits and ensured banks operated responsibly. This is important to make sure that your money is protected in an economic downturn. Tennessee Valley Authority provided electricity, flood control, irrigation, and conservation in the Tennessee Valley. The Social Security Act created the first federal pension program for the elderly. It also provided unemployment payouts and financial aid to women with dependent children, the visually impaired, and or the physically challenged. Social Security is around as well presently. The Works Progress Administration. As mentioned before, this funded jobs programs across the country. It included programs for creative occupations such as artists, writers, and photographers. The photographers, by all means, did a great job of documenting the Great Depression, and they would not have had the opportunity if it wasn't for the New Deal. Before we get started with our text-dependent questions, I wanted to discuss tone versus mood. Now, our first text-dependent question states, in source E, How does President Roosevelt try to provide a sense of hope to Americans? Regarding the sense of hope, you have to consider what his tone was, because tone is the feeling or atmosphere that the author has set in the text or story. But mood is the feeling or atmosphere that the reader gets when reading the text or story. So, to determine how President Roosevelt tries to provide a sense of hope to Americans, you have to determine your own mood as you read it. Are you given a sense of hope? As well, it is important during this time that the leader should take the appropriate tone with their audience so they get the intended result. President Roosevelt had to be aware of his word choice as it would directly impact the mood the American people would feel. So as we take a look at the first text-dependent question, we want to consider word choice and the goal. Were the people hopeful? If you're following along in the learning plan, great. If not, I will leave the question up on the slide so that you are able to copy it down in your notebook. In source E, how does President Roosevelt try to provide a sense of hope to Americans? Well, let's read the quote one more time, and then I'm going to support why I have some of the words in bold. This great nation will endure, as it has endured, will revive, and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I've put in bold some words that stuck out to me as I read the quote a second time. By using language such as endure, revive, and prosper, these are all words that are inspiring, and in times of despair means something to those that need that small light of hope that can be given by the proper leadership. So, in answering, you're going to state whether or not you believe this provides a sense of hope to Americans. Our next text-dependent question is, what was the purpose of the New Deal programs President Roosevelt used to bring an end to the Great Depression? And if you remember from the source background, you know that the New Deal was not solely the reason why the Great Depression ended. It was the start of World War II that helped prompt the end of the Great Depression. So keep that in mind as you answer. You can also refer to the 3 R's to support your understanding of the end of the Great Depression as well. Next, we have text-dependent question number 3. Was the New Deal successful at ending the Great Depression? Now, I also referred to this in question 2, but here's a great time to answer it. What piece of evidence from source F backs up your claim? Source F is the chart. You can also refer to the 3 R's here as well, because again, we were focused on relief, recovery, and reform. What did the New Deal do to provide relief and recovery? All right, next up we have the performance tasks for tomorrow. If you are not able to complete the performance task, then consider reading the text that will be posted with this lesson. So for the performance task, review the information presented below about our economy today during the COVID-19 crisis. After, complete the charts comparing today's economy to the economic conditions people faced during the Great Depression. Is leadership taking some of the same steps to help the American people? What similarities can you find from this time and back then? With this performance task, or even just journaling about the events of COVID-19, you were able to not only document history as it's happening, but you're able to write it through your own eyes. Make sure as you work on this performance task, you are seeing how either history is repeating itself or we're learning from the mistakes of the Great Depression. Although Franklin Roosevelt did his best to restore America, it took a lot of time and patience to happen. The same is going to happen after COVID-19. America will never be the same. However, it could be better than it was before. Make sure as you work on your performance task, you are keeping this in mind. that we're learning from our mistakes as you work on this performance task. You want to keep in mind that you can compare and contrast the events of the Great Depression and the events currently happening. If possible, you may be able to find a family member or a family friend that is older that survived the Great Depression. They surely do have a story to tell, just like you will 15 to 20 years from now when people discuss COVID-19. I can tell you now that many of you were born between 2009 and 2010, but I can still remember even in 2010 the impact that 9/11 had from 2001. You are now a historian and you have a job to tell the story the way you see it and the way that it impacted you. So keep a record of these things because someday it may come in handy when you're retelling. Keep newspaper clippings, keep videos if you can. Document this time period because hopefully it will never happen again, but it will be something that we can learn. Remember to also focus on the tone that leadership is taking. Pay attention to the word choice and focus in on your mood as you take in and internalize these messages from the media and also things that you read online. How are they going to be important factors in looking back at this crisis that we are currently facing? What do you think about the current state we are in and how it would be viewed years from now? Thank you for another great discussion on social studies and the Great Depression. If you need further information and resources, please visit WTULocal6.net. Have a great day.